Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Racing Writers Podcast. This is a very fun episode. Myself and my good friend Matt Weaver of AutoWeek.com, we talk racing all the time, we talk wrestling all the time, we start conversations and we just go for hours on end. And I said, you know what, Matt, let's do that this week, because we've got an exciting race weekend coming up with Phoenix Raceway and the eliminations. And I said, but this time, unlike the past, let's put some microphones to it and make it a podcast. So Matt Weaver is the guest this week, and as you can see from the time length, we went for quite a while and eventually just had to say, okay, you know what, no more rambling, no more taking up all this time, because we probably could have went for a couple more hours, but we covered a lot of ground. We recorded this a couple hours after the Stewart-Haas Racing announcement, where they introduced Aric Almirola as the future driver of the number 10. So of course, we covered that, and we talked a lot about some other silly season stuff, including Matt Kenseth, Danica Patrick, Kurt Busch. The theme was Stewart-Haas Racing. So we covered a lot of ground. Of course, we threw some wrestling references in there, and even at the end of the show, we talked a little bit about wrestling off of the 30 for 30 on Ric Flair, which aired on Tuesday night. So we covered a lot of ground, so I really don't want to go long with this intro because there's a lot here for you guys. I hope you stick it through. I hope you find it as fun as we did. I joke during the podcast, this is not a very clean episode in the sense of I really didn't do much to clean it up with, pauses or taking out all the ums and ahs. It's natural. We just sat down and had a conversation, so I hope it comes off like that. I hope you guys feel like you're sitting right there with us as we recorded this. So again, Matt Weaver is the guest this week, and I hope you guys enjoy. This has so far been one of the most fun one I have done. Next week will be Tony Gibson. I also talked to Tony Gibson today, Wednesday, November 8th. Tony Gibson, the crew chief for Kurt Busch. We discussed this season. We discussed Tony Gibson's career and covered a lot of ground with him. So that will be next week going into Homestead. So as we get ready for this episode, as we go into next week, once again, I hope you're leaving a rating and review and enjoying the show so far. You can also leave any feedback you have on social media if you follow me on there. So let's get started. Let's do the show. It's a fun one. It's a long one, but I hope you guys enjoy it. Here is Matt Weaver and myself shooting the breeze about racing, wrestling, and everything in between. You good?
Yeah.
You got some coffee?
I do.
You got the tweeter machine?
I'm coffeeed up. I'm caffeinated. I'm social media'd. I'm amped up.
All right. So, Stewart-Haas, Aric Almirola, we just got back. Well, not just got back. We finished up some work. And we have been digesting Aric Almirola to Stewart-Haas in the number 10. So first impressions of what you heard today.
Well, we digested some Smithfield bacon, too. That's my first and second impression. Actually, I did not partake. I'm not the biggest fan of bacon. Sorry, Smithfield. I'm sure it's a great product, but...
They had eggs, too.
They had eggs? I missed the eggs.
Yeah, well, they kind of made like a breakfast sandwich.
Okay.
So it was like a croissant. You could put some egg on there. You could put some bacon on there. And then they were making lunch stuff. I don't know what that was, because by the time I left, they were still over there cooking. It was bacon galore. It was Smithfield smells everywhere.
And to your point, that was kind of the one thing that stood out to me the most, is kind of the scale of production that they put on for this. It was a lot more than your standard driver introduction press conference. Even by SHR standards, we were both at the Clint Boyer announcement a little over a year ago, and that was fairly standard. They brought in Clint and Tony was there and Gene was there. There's a Q&A, some one-on-ones, and then we went home. But you had the Smithfield executives, you had the full court press there, everyone at SHR. They opened up the shop to the media. They really wanted to make this a big deal. They wanted to make a splash with Aric, and I'm very curious to see what that partnership produces next year.
Well, we had laughed off air that they had played this up. I mean, they sent out probably a good 5 to 7 email reminders that this event was taking place today. They really were going all out for this announcement. And then you get there and they do the announcement. They have Tony Stewart there. They have Almirola. They have the Smithfield VP, I believe it was. And they have breakout sessions. They've got all of NASCAR social people there, but it was a very well thought out, and it was all in. I mean, this was not just, as you said, it was not just, well, here's our driver, here's our car. They're going all in with Mr. Almirola.
Yeah, I think the moment that I realized this was going to be important is I was leaving the airport in Dallas from the race on Monday, and I got the phone call from Mike Arning, who is the head of communications there. And this guy manages a lot. I mean, he's not only just on the NASCAR side now, he manages their F1 communications program as well. And when he's making phone calls to the media to make sure that we're all there, that we're writing stories, that we're doing social, they wanted to make this a show. And I think that's a testament to the things they want to do together, not only this off season, but beyond. I think you're going to see a lot of effort put into that program. I think that Aric is in the sweet spot of his career. He's 33 years old. He's got a win. It's a restrictor plate win. But he's a guy that at one time was well regarded. Joe Gibbs Racing development driver. We've all talked to death about Milwaukee Mile in 2007, and that's part of what landed these two together, Aric and Tony. And I think that this is something they believe in wholeheartedly.
And Tony brought that up, I mean, numerous times. I have to admit, as this press conference is going on and Stewart is talking about why he likes this deal, why they made this deal happen, those were the two things that stood out. Was Milwaukee, which he continually talked about and how Almirola impressed him, and then the friendship that I don't think maybe many of us knew that these two have. I mean, it makes sense. Stewart was at Joe Gibbs Racing, Almirola was a development driver over there. Apparently they go to dirt races together, and they've just become good friends through the years. But I was really taken aback because I didn't look at this announcement as more of a personal relationship that kind of made this come to be. I was like, okay, here's an available driver with an available sponsor.
Yeah.
So I was very impressed that Tony went to great lengths to really break down that, no, we're good friends. I was very excited to make this happen from day one. And he even said, I have a vested interest in this team and this car and this driver. Not that, of course, he's going to get special treatment. But it was very interesting to hear Tony Stewart admit that, this was kind of like a personal project for him. He wanted this to happen for personal reasons.
I think Tony was prepared for the narrative to be that this was an available driver with a sponsor willing to spend money, and I think he wanted to squash that.
Right, and Stewart-Haas, we've all talked about, everybody in the garage knows, Stewart-Haas needs sponsorship. Whether it's the 10 car or the 14 car, they need sponsorship. So Aric Almirola and Smithfield are available. Of course you snatch them up. You've got a shop to keep the lights on, you've got employees to feed, you've got their families to worry about. But I think you're right. I think he went to great lengths to kind of change that narrative that, no, we're doing this because I believe in him.
So I'm not skeptical about this at all, because if Tony says they're friends, then they're friends. But do you see the two of them hanging out a lot at the racetrack back when Tony was driving? Because this is where I'm getting at. When Tony had his incident in New York, when he first came back at Atlanta, the memory that I have was Tony and Clint were hip to hip that weekend. Wherever you saw Tony, Clint was there. And when it became known that he would replace Tony in the 14 car, it was like a light bulb that went off in my head, like, well, of course, because they're clearly very close. I don't see the two of them hanging out that much together. So I'm not questioning it, but it was a surprise to hear that they were that close. And I'm curious as a reporter to learn more about these stories, about which races they've gone to together, how close they have been, because again, not that I'm skeptical or that I'm questioning it, it's just a story that we don't know yet. And as storytellers, these are stories that I can't wait to hear, because, Aric Almirola, who is very demure, he's very, very chill. And then Tony Stewart, who is, he's Tony Stewart, right? Smoke is bombastic. The stories of those two guys getting together at races, as a storyteller, I cannot wait to delve into more of that, because I think that's like a wealth of unknown information.
I'm with you. I'm not saying Tony's not being truthful. I don't think that's at all the case. I think I was just more surprised because I feel like we all went there today under a certain impression. And that impression was, okay, it's Smithfield's sponsor. We already knew that. So it's probably going to be the guy who's been representing Smithfield for the past 6 years. But again, when Tony starts talking and Aric starts talking, it was kind of nice to be caught off guard by a narrative that we weren't expecting. We
had a few of those.
Right, and we can talk about that in a little bit. I guess it was more, you go there expecting one thing and you think you're going to write about one thing and you leave there with a completely different agenda and a completely different narrative, in a sense. I mean, that was my thing. I was not expecting to hear that these two are good friends and that Tony Stewart is personally invested in Aric Almirola.
It's refreshing to me because I feel like that's the foundation for all those guys there. You know, we all know that Tony and Clint are close friends, and so that relationship works. You know, Gene and Kurt were kind of tied together there, and that's their relationship. But I think Kurt's fit in fairly well, a lot more than I thought we would. You know, Kevin seems to get along well with everyone as well. I know a lot of the guys at Stewart-Haas Racing on the engineering side, the mechanical side, and these guys are all blue collar, you know, short track guys, and I think that kind of lends itself well to Tony Stewart and his mentality. I think there's a certain, I don't even want to say corporate philosophy, but that's what it is a business philosophy of the kind of people they want to bring in. And I was surprised to learn, at least today, that Aric Almirola kind of fit into that philosophy a lot more than any of us thought about.
Well, I mean, does he? Because this is what I'm thinking. I mean, Aric has been in the Cup Series this is his 6th full year. He's been around longer than that. He's run some races with DEI. He ran a few races with Finch. His first start came with Joe Gibbs Racing. He's been here. He's not unfamiliar. But he's never been in this situation before. He's never had a plethora of teammates at his exposure.
Good word.
Well, thank you. I'm channeling Nate Ryan. But he's never had a bunch of other crew chiefs and engineers and a shop like a Stewart-Haas Racing where there's going to be so many people and resources at his exposure. So I'm curious if how does he fit into this? Because, I think you had used the word a little while ago. He's very demure. He's very, he comes off very quiet and to himself. But then again, he's always been by himself. So I'm going to be very interested to see how this shakes up. And another thing that I was interested to hear is that Billy Scott's still going to be the crew chief. I kind of felt like maybe there could have been some moving parts and pieces over at Stewart-Haas with kind of crew chiefs. I don't think, the four is going to stay together. Kevin and Rodney are going to stay together. But then you have Billy working with Danica Patrick this year. You've got Bugga and Clint, do they kind of shake things up? So I wasn't ruling anything out, but to hear Tony say unequivocally, Billy Scott's the crew chief next year, hey, it's another piece of the puzzle, but at the same time, is that a good piece of the puzzle?
Yeah.
Are we on board with this?
Yeah, I agree with you because, the results haven't necessarily been there this year, and I think we all collectively give them a free pass because this is the rebuilding year, to use a stick and ball term. This was the post-Chevy Ford year, and I thought everyone expected a certain degree of growing pains. And we saw after the race that Tony and Kevin and Rodney Childers, sorry. That's what a name to forget. But Rodney, the three of those guys sat there.
It's been a long year.
It has
I have
been.
to admit, I'm ready for a nap.
Me too.
And just as a side note, and we'll get back to this, but as a side note while we're talking about this, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm already getting emails popping up about, 2018.
The media tour.
Yeah, the media tour. Slow your roll, Charlotte Motor Speedway. I need to take a nap first, okay?
As a mutual friend of ours would say, back her down, son.
Back her down. I mean, we've got paint schemes for next year, and I love me some paint schemes. You know me very well. We have sat around and talked many things about racing, and we have talked about paint schemes. I love paint schemes. But all of this popping up in my email, slow down. I need to take a nap. But anyway, as you were saying.
So I would understand if they wanted to make some changes given that the results aren't there. But I think that a couple of years ago, we're not that far removed from SHR doing some crew chief shakeups. And I think they feel like these combinations are the best ones and that the 2017 season was not the best platform to showcase that. And I think with introducing a new driver, while you could argue that's the best time to do a shakeup, I think that you don't want to shake up too much. It's a lot easier to take a driver into a team that has built-in continuity than to just shake everything up. I mean, those are two very different philosophies, but I think that you would like to have a steady, constant of team that's been working together, and let the driver just be the thing you plug in. And I think that's pretty much what they decided to do for next year, that you have these teams that you believe in, you've got a driver you believe in, so don't change anything.
Yeah.
Just plug them in and go play.
Well, it's probably the same thing with 14 team. I mean, who knows? There could be changes down the road. But yes, you take Tony Stewart out, you plug Clint Boyer in. So, again, it was just kind of interesting to see that, because there's also, another little side note, we still don't know what Tony Gibson's doing next year. He has made it known that he wants to come off the road at some point. He's tired. Tony, old man, is tired. The grind of a full-time career as a crew chief, car chief, I mean, he's been around the block. He's tired. And he actually told me that, a little bit today. He's going to be next week's guest on the podcast. And he didn't say outright that he was coming off the road next year. At least what he told me, that the discussions have not been had yet. But it very much sounds like the sooner the better for him. Mm-hmm. He still wants to be involved. He still loves being at Stewart-Haas, but he wants to be at the shop. He doesn't, the grind has worn him down. So a lot of things still to be decided over, I guess, at Stewart-Haas. But we've got a 10 car filled out. Now we got to get Kurt signed up, which sounds, Tony was very optimistic about that as well.
Yeah, I think that on Sunday after Texas, Tony could have shot that down and said something along the lines of, we'll see what happens. But instead, he chose to say this is something that he wants, it's something the team wants, and is their every intention. Yeah.
I mean, this has been going on for months. I mean, Kurt's option was revealed not to be picked up back at the end of July, early August.
Yeah.
Right around Watkins Glen time, I think it was. But through this whole few months, neither side has given any indication that they don't want to be together or that they won't be together. It's all about just, hey, we've got to shore up, the numbers. Yeah, numbers, sponsorship, and all that stuff. And from what I understand and some things that I heard about what may have developed over the weekend at Texas, and then hearing Tony talk today, where he actually said for the first time we're fairly close. I wouldn't be surprised if that does get done here within the next couple weeks, if not sooner.
Yeah, I agree.
So, we can take Kurt then off the table, Aric's off the table, and Matt Kenseth, shifting gears, Matt Kenseth has confirmed what
he took himself off the table.
Just confirming, unfortunately, what was the inevitable. So I'm going to be really sad, though, to kind of see Matt K go, Matt the Brat. He's Hall of Famer for sure, I would say. Just throwing that out there.
First ballot,
Hall of Famer. But I don't know. I was kind of interested, or I was really, I should say, interested in what Matt said, because he's really not happy about this. Not happy about how it kind of all went down. I mean, he's pretty much being traded in for a newer, younger, shinier model, is what it all comes down to.
I think the most damning thing to Matt is that when JGR lost a veteran in Carl Edwards, I'm sure if he was being honest, he would have thought that would have given him job security, because you need that veteran presence within this team. So even if Erik Jones is close to coming in, even if Daniel Suarez is close to coming in, they need that veteran to be the anchor, and that's been kind of his role. And so when Carl left, that kind of expedited the Daniel Suarez process. And then, of course, Erik Jones had to come over from the 77 to the 20, because that was always the plan anyway, and that's where everyone wants him to be. And the 77 can't sustain that without money, so it just made sense business-wise. But I think that Matt probably thought that losing a veteran in Carl Edwards would have given him extra job security, and when that wasn't the case, I'm sure it left him miffed. Now, we heard Dale Jr. talk about it recently, about how the scale is going down on driver salaries.
Mm-hmm. Well, whether he was right or wrong, I mean, he's admitted that he rubbed some people the wrong way with that. But I think it had a little bit of validity to it.
But I know that he's had calls, Matt Kenseth has. I know for sure that RCR and Front Row at least, kicked the bucket around on that topic a little bit.
And he did say that he had opportunities, but he doesn't want to race just for the sake of racing.
He wants to win, and he's been in a winning car for the entirety of his Cup career, and there's no reason to change that, especially at his age too. I don't think he's ever had an interest in being the Bill Elliott, the Ricky Rudd type who is just there logging laps.
I mean, Darrell Waltrip did it towards the end of his career.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, who wants to do that? Who wants to go from contending for wins and championships to just kind of being in the way, essentially?
And a lot of those guys...
And I can't picture Matt Kenseth doing that anyway.
No, and I think a lot of guys do it with the thought that they're building towards something. I mean, I think a guy, not that he's the same caliber of driver, but I think of like what Joe Nemechek has done for the past decade. He was content being a back marker, slow car, start and park type guy because he was trying to lay the foundation for John Hunter. And I think now that Ross Kenseth, his son, Matt's son Ross, has gotten married, he has sold his late model, and he's done racing. I don't think Matt has anything that he's building towards. Not that was ever part of his plan anyway.
No, he's not building towards anything. But
so for him, it's competing or nothing else.
And as he keeps saying, he still believes he can compete at the highest level. He still believes he can contribute to a race team by going out and contending for wins and contending for championships. I mean, we always talk about and we did it earlier off air, just talking about some stuff. You always talk about the classic coulda, woulda, shoulda. Matt Kenseth coulda, woulda, shoulda won a few races this year, and instead he hasn't. But it's not because he can't drive. I mean, even at, 45 or whatever it may be, he can still get the job done.
So here's my question to you. If he's won a couple of races, do you think it makes a difference in how this plays out?
No, because, and last night, Kenny Bruce and I were on PRN Pit Reporters, and one of the conversations we had was how the sport has changed. And I said, it's still a sport, I said, but the biggest difference nowadays is the business. This is a business. It's all about sponsorship and funding. And unfortunately, people get mad, and I'm sure some people who are going to listen to this get mad, but you could be the most talented, undeniable, great person in the garage, and you may have a helmet, but if you don't have a check stashed inside that helmet, you're not getting in my race car.
I think that's the most frustrating thing about being a fan.
I gotta pay the bills.
The most frustrating thing about being a fan, and I'm a fan first, and I know you are too, and that's how we view our journalistic, scope a lot of the times. As a fan, I'm just frustrated for the sport. I'm upset for the sport because when a guy like Matt Kenseth, who has so much still to contribute, can't, what does it say about our entire industry? But the reality is we're hurting for that fourth manufacturer right now more than ever because right now, Chevy and Ford, they're both trying to compete, but Toyota's setting the bar. They're the ones that have driver development programs. They're the ones that are funding drivers who can't bring a check. I mean, you look at Eric Jones, that is a TRD funded driver ever since he won the Snowball Derby a couple of years ago. And so they have those sort of programs. Ford doesn't right now, Chevy doesn't. And so you just think, man, if we had that fourth OEM, then a guy like Matt Kenseth could be that anchor, because it would be like when Dodge came in, they needed Bill Elliott to be their first veteran to kind of steer the program. And so this yet another reason why we really need that fourth manufacturer, because you think Matt Kenseth would have that job because the manufacturer would pay for the veteran driver.
I don't know if it's, yes, we could probably use another manufacturer in the sport, but again, I think it all comes down to money, and the money's just not there. For instance, look at all the sponsors who used to be able to do a full 38 race schedule, and they can't afford to do that anymore. We are getting so expensive as a sport, which is not a new thing. That's happened over the course of time. Every year it costs a little bit more to do hotels and travel, and you got to pay for tires and lug nuts and even ice bags to cool down the race cars. It's an expensive sport, but for some reason it has just gotten so much to the point now where the funding has it's at the forefront of every conversation. And it's all about sponsorship. It's all about who has money and who doesn't have money. And we're down to maybe a handful of sponsors that can afford a full 38 race schedule.
Were you surprised to see Smithfield be on the car full season next year?
Yes, because they're not even doing that at Petty right now. You've got Air Force over there and a few other sponsors. I of course can't think of them off the top of my head, but no, they're not doing a full sponsorship right now. So again, the numbers in this sport, trying to work it all out, it's like,
I think the cost to participate have steadied a little bit, but it doesn't matter because the amount of money pouring in has continued to decrease.
Yes.
So I think the next generation of Cup car, whatever it looks like, whatever it is, NASCAR has to be very studious about how they're going to make this car more affordable and to be able to limit how much teams spend, whether it's the salary cap proposals, whether it's banning wind tunnel time somehow.
I mean, we've cut down on testing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, of course, NASCAR, whether you agree with it or not, NASCAR is always looking for ways, and they're making changes, once again, whether you agree with them or not. But they're taking action.
The teams are to blame, though, because you take one avenue away that they can spend, and they just spend it elsewhere.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing with, we take downforce away, but the teams are still working to get it back. And then they complain about, well, these cars are doing this, this, and this, and, well, then stop putting the downforce in the cars. But I would say I got the impression, or I guess it really hit me, of how big a deal this has become. And I won't say that we're in trouble as a sport, but I will say I was hit by how concerning the funding and the money aspect has become. What was the one thing we were all talking about during the summer months this year?
We've talked about a lot of things, Kelly.
We were talking about who doesn't have sponsors.
Yeah.
Furniture Row probably shutting down a second car. And every week it seemed like another team owner was coming out talking and almost pleading with the sport. And once again, they play a role as well. But it seemed like every week another owner or crew chief or driver was coming out and saying, we have to lower the cost. We have to lower the cost. I feel like that's what dominated the headlines this summer.
For sure. And all three divisions.
Yeah.
The Truck Series is moving to that spec program. We've got composite bodies coming in the Xfinity Series. So the sanctioning body is trying their damnedest. And the teams owe some degree of responsibility as well.
Absolutely.
And the RTA, they are collaborating with the sanctioning body to fix that. But, not even just Kenseth for a second. A guy that I think of, it's astounding to me that right now that Landon Castle does not have a job because he's so young with so much experience.
Not only doesn't have a job, but I know you were there, and I talked to him a little bit separately. Talladega, when we talked to Landon, he made it clear that not only does he not have a ride, he doesn't have any funding to go with him.
No.
That was the most surprising part to me. Because we all look at him and everybody calls him, the next generation of star, very marketable, very social media savvy. But then when you really break it down, you're like, well, that's great, but apparently not good enough for Loves to want to stick with him, or CSX, or all those partners on that car.
A guy that is 28 years old, who has been in this sport for a decade, who at one point was Jeff Gordon's heir apparent, who was a General Motors development driver. That guy who has still not even reached his peak yet.
Right, that guy who, like you said, he's been here a decade, but he's only 28 years old. I mean, he's run Xfinity race. He's been all over the place.
He took JD Motorsports to a top 10 championship finish in the Xfinity Series a couple of years ago. Led laps at Bristol on older tires and held off the field. The guy's incredible, and he's just as good, in my opinion, as a Matt Kenseth, but younger and maybe even more marketable, more social media savvy.
That goes back to what I just said. I mean, I just mentioned all those things, and yet you break it down, you look even further, and you're like, oh, well, rule him out because he doesn't have funding. It's crazy.
I have this expression that a lot of fans, and you know this, they still think this is a results-driven business, and I keep saying results don't matter. You get results in the boardroom, not on the racetrack.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, the only time results matter are, when it comes to a championship. Other than that, when we leave the racetrack, results don't mean squat.
And they really don't now with the new structure, the purse structure, and the charter system. A lot of teams are making money just for showing up because what their charters offer them. Results don't matter there.
Some guys still don't know what they're making for either winning races or just competing. But that's a whole separate story because they took away, NASCAR stopped showing the earnings.
Because I don't want to forget about this, the question that brought this up was Smithfield and why it was surprising that they're on the car for a full season. I think this is just a good opportunity for them to be able to B2B cross-promote with Outback and with Jimmy John's. And I think maybe that's the way that it starts to make sense because you have all these food industries kind of coming together with one team. So maybe there's some cross-promotion there that makes that more financially sustainable.
It does, but I will say this. All I want to know is, when Greg Alding used to represent Krispy Kreme, you and I I remember this one time. We were sitting in the press box at Martinsville, and the Krispy Kreme folks personally delivered us some Krispy Kreme, okay? Now, we've got Smithfield over at Stewart-Haas, we got Jimmy John's, got Outback, got all of these amazing, like, anybody who knows me, I love food, okay? So, if Stewart-Haas doesn't capitalize by offering some delicious treats to us at the racetrack every once in a while, I'm going to be a little disappointed.
First of all,
I'm just going to put that out there.
Just want to give a shout out to Rusty. Rusty was always good to us. That's Rusty Davison.
With Krispy Kreme, yes, with Greg Alding. But hey, it's all about getting your name and your brand out there. What better way than to keep us media folk happy? That's all I'm saying.
We are the vehicles for their message. And so going back to our original conversation about this press conference and how much bacon was available, they know what they're doing. This is part of the plan.
It was wonderful. They did a fantastic job. I will hand it to everybody at Stewart-Haas and Smithfield. They knew what kind of event they wanted to have, and going back to how we opened up the thing, they were all in. So,
and by the way, I want to state this too. I know sometimes we're guilty as media of, talking about us and what people give us, but I guarantee you next year, if you're a fan and you've got a hot pass or a cold pass and you're in the garage, there are probably going to be opportunities to get some bacon and drink it down with some Monster if they come back.
Right, and I say this because that's exactly my point. Smithfield has done a wonderful job of being present not only on a race car but in the garage. Mm-hmm. In their tenure with Petty, there has always been times where we've gotten releases saying, hey, come to the 43 hauler because Smithfield or Waffle House or whatever it is
there was
doing
a B2B business deal there too.
Exactly. They were doing a breakfast and, hey, take some time to talk to the King or take some time to talk to Almirola. So I say it jokingly, but Smithfield does do a very good job of being ever present in the garage. And, look, if Smithfield wants to feed me breakfast and then I'm going to go back out there and the Ford team wants to give me some Jimmy John sandwiches, that's all I'm saying. I'm not above throwing that out there.
Oh, same. And I will say that I think they have got a good ROI, the return on investment, from being in NASCAR. And I think from listening to, and I hate that I can't remember the executive's name, their CEO was there with us today. I think they truly believe that Aric is a driver capable of giving them results. They've already given them results in the boardroom. Now I think they want to take that relationship to the next stage and try to go win races, get results on the racetrack as well.
Right, and John Pauley is the EVP of Sales and Marketing at Smithfield. So let's just wrap this up because I don't want to miss this point because this is something that you and I have talked about off air, that Kenny Bruce and I talked about last night on Pit Reporters. It's something that I will probably write about. It's going to be something I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about. Is this now sink or swim for Aric Almirola? Because he talked about, I'm going to a championship organization. This is all I've ever wanted. He's got the belief of Tony Stewart. Smithfield is not only sticking with him, but they have made it very clear that the reason they are making this move is because they are a competition and competitive driven company. They want results. Aric wants to go and win races, of course. But I'm curious, you make a move like this, you're going to a championship winning organization. And granted, there's been some downtimes over there as they have adjusted to life under the Ford banner. But it all goes back to what I just said. Is this going to be do or die, sink or swim, now or never for Aric Almirola?
He talked about it during the press conference. He said that he didn't want the storyline to be that he never had the car. And he's like, say what you will about Richard Petty Motorsports, but that's always been kind of an underlying thing. Well, you can go get it done on a restrictor plate track, and you can win at Daytona, contend at Talladega, but when it comes to downforce tracks, short tracks, 1 mile tracks, they didn't have the equipment to get it done. So yeah, absolutely. At 33 years old, being a former top development driver, being a guy that has won at multiple levels now, he hasn't got it done at the cup level. So I think this is his defining moment. Because for him, he either gets it done, and people will always say, well, this is just validation, that he got the chance to get it done in good equipment. And Tony Stewart said it earlier today, too, that one of the reasons why he got out of NASCAR is he feels like it was too dependent on whether or not you had a good car. Well, now he's given Aric Almirola the car, and it's up to him to go get it done as a driver. And so I think for him, this is what he's been waiting for his whole career.
Yeah.
And it's either going to work out or he's going to go do something else.
And me personally, I absolutely believe, and I'll be the one to say it, I mean, you've got to put up or shut up at this point. I mean, this is the opportunity you say you've been waiting for. We know what Stewart-Haas Racing is capable of. And hey, I mean, in all fairness, these are the same questions that Dale Earnhardt Jr. had to answer when he went from DEI to Hendrick. I mean, every driver at some point faces this. You know, we could probably say the same thing about Matt Kenseth. Matt Kenseth probably had to prove that, you know, he was already an established driver and a champion at Roush Fenway Racing, but even still, he went to Joe Gibbs Racing, which, of course, is now probably the standard bearer in the Cup Series, and I'm sure he had to prove himself to some people all over again. So I'm going to be very curious of how this works out. So we've talked about Aric.
Let me add one more thing on Aric, though. To me, what stands out is that I don't know what to make of Aric Almirola yet. And
that's a good point.
I don't want to criticize RPM because I love the King and I love everyone at RPM. Those are great people.
Right.
But their program is a far cry from what it was in the 70s and 80s, obviously.
Well, of course.
So
I'm right there with you. I don't want to say that this is all Richard Petty Motorsports' fault, but granted, and I think admittedly, they will also say that they've got some work to do.
Yeah, they're at a certain point right now. And so I think that we saw him with DEI. We saw them once they merged into Ginn, and he was sharing the car with Mark Martin, I believe.
Yep. 2007, 2008.
Yeah, we've seen him at Evernham when that team started to fall apart after the merger with Petty. We then saw them with Petty, the 43 car. That team, at best, is a fringe playoff contender. I don't know that
made the playoffs.
Yeah.
You know, everybody,
winning the race.
Right. Everybody will say, "Oh, well, you know, it was range. Win's a win. He got in the playoffs.
For
it's
sure.
a big deal for them." And you know, he almost ran again. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Had some bad luck. I think they blew up at Chicago. He probably could have.
Fast.
He could have advanced maybe out of the first round.
And Drew's a heck of a crew chief too.
Oh, Drew Blickensderfer, I don't think gets near enough credit as being one of the great minds in the garage for sure.
So I don't think, to put this all together, I don't think we have a good grasp on who Aric Almirola is as a driver yet. And I know a lot of fans are very critical, or at least on my social media, because they made it about him versus Matt Kenseth. And I don't think that's fair, because people are like, well, this guy's won one race and Matt Kenseth has a championship. Well, Matt Kenseth was with Roush, and then he was with Joe Gibbs Racing. And I just listed all the teams that Aric was with, and those are mid-tier teams. Well, this is, like you said, this is his put up or shut up, go or go home moment. And I don't personally know what he is yet. We're about to find out starting next year.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. Who is Aric Almirola? What can he do? And I look forward to getting those answers. So we've already covered a lot. So we know what Eric's going to be doing. We think we know what Kurt Busch is going to be doing. We know what Matt Kenseth's going to be doing. Let's just keep it all in the family. Just throw this out here real quick. What does our gut instinct kind of say about Danica Patrick? I think she still wants to race, but I have not been given any indication that, once again, going back to the whole funding thing, I don't know. I don't think she has any funding. So at this point, I'd kind of be surprised if something were to develop for her.
You know, same, and I'm curious to hear what you've heard too. But when you walk around the garage and you talk to people that you know fairly well, and the conversation comes up about Danica, there's like this assumption that she's going to land somewhere, because it's like, well, you know,
why wouldn't she?
Yeah, it's Danica, and there's some way you can structure a contract to make that work out. And we saw it earlier this month or last month that NASCAR put some degree of effort to make sure that Bubba Wallace had a ride, and he was able to get that deal they announced at Texas, the mortgage company, to be able to do some co-promotion with the sanctioning body, with RPM, and they said they were willing to do the same thing with Danica because they wanted to promote their diversity efforts. And certainly Danica applies in the same way that Bubba Wallace applies. So I think that's the reason why when you talk to people in the garage, there's this assumption that they'll find some way to make that happen. But the difference here is that Bubba will be a rookie driver. He just wants an opportunity in NASCAR to show what he's got, and then maybe try to take those talents elsewhere. Danica came in here with a top-tier organization. She has competed with some of the best cars available in the Cup Series garage, and I think that anything less than that is unacceptable. Because, let's be frank for a minute, the results haven't been there in a good car, so what would it be like in a car that's lesser? And I think that's the difference.
Well, and at this point, everybody has the same charts. Everybody can see the same cars out there. We all know what the situation is of what cars are available. And I want to say at this point, Danica is not going to land in a quote unquote good car. I think they're all filled, to be honest with you. So if she does land somewhere, you would look at, and I'm not saying any of this is happening because I don't know. I honestly don't know. But you look at teams out there who may do something. I mean, obviously Front Row needs to fill a car now, maybe 2 cars. So it's going to be those type of cars that are going to be her options. But I don't know what she wants to do, and I'm not sure if she knows what she wants to do, because she's kind of given off both impressions here the last couple weeks of, I want to still race, but I want to be competitive. And then she'll turn around and make another comment where she'll say, well, I need to figure out what I want to do. Do I want to do this because it's a long season?
Yeah.
So
would it surprise you if she ran a select schedule of the restrictor plate races, the road course races, Martinsville? She's always been very good at Martinsville.
It wouldn't surprise me, but again, it would just come down to, how does it all work out? What does the deal look like? Who is she going to run for, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to wait and see kind of how that all unfolds, I guess.
Yeah, the one team that I think that people are waiting for, that's the next domino, is RCR. And RCR keeps saying, we're going to announce something before the end of the season. Well, guess what? The end of the season's like 10 days from now, so it's time to get after it.
Well, they keep saying, we're going to announce something before the end of the season. Richard Childress had said to me and somebody else at Talladega that it was coming very soon. So who knows what the definition of very soon is. But yes,
I was told over the weekend, hang tight.
Yes, I mean, we still, but honestly, we don't know. And that is a very big piece of the puzzle, because there has been so many rumors out there about, what becomes of the 27, what, does Richard Petty Motorsports go over there? How did that fall into the equation? You've got Germain Racing now making a bunch of changes, which is a technical partner of RCR. You've got even Colleague Racing got something going on over at their shop. Chris Rice keeps posting pictures of construction going on over there, another affiliate of RCR. Granted, it's an Xfinity team, but it just goes to show that there's a lot of things going on over at RCR, and we still don't have all the answers to.
Absolutely.
So I think that is the 88 car at Hendrick Motorsports was the biggest domino. I would probably say that maybe it was then Danica, what Danica was going to do, but after that, I mean, the 27 and RCR, what they've got going on is right there in the top 3 of the biggest storylines we've got right now.
Because here's the interesting thing. Even if RCR chooses not to run that car, then that becomes a very valuable charter. And there are teams looking for charters now, too, and that's a completely different conversation.
Right, and there's tons of charters out there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a different conversation.
So my point that I'm getting at is if people are waiting for that 27 car to get filled, it may not. They could decide to do something else entirely.
And I believe, I've talked about this with plenty of people. There's also the belief that, what if the 27 goes away and the 43 comes in? I mean, there's so many things that honestly could unfold over there.
RPM is still looking for a shop. Maybe that shop is in Welcome, North Carolina.
Right. They're not. They have said they're not renewing the lease on their current shop. They still haven't even answered who their manufacturer is going to be. There's a lot of questions still. So it's going to be a very busy off season. So we've covered a lot so far, but we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't preview Phoenix.
I was going to say Homestead, too. I want to be able to talk championship predictions.
We could talk. Look, This is my podcast. I could do whatever I want. We could talk for 3 hours. There's podcasts out there that go for 3 hours. So we could go as long as you want. So what do you want to jump to? You had said before we went on air there was something else you wanted to talk about as well, but I think that might have been wrestling.
Oh, yeah, the Ric Flair 30 for 30.
So we could switch it up here, talk a little wrestling.
Yeah, I haven't got a chance to see the Ric Flair documentary yet, and we can touch on that later. We can kind of go on a random aside, but I do want to talk about these final 2 races because I'm excited.
I'm very excited.
I love this playoff format. I know that's not a popular opinion, but it incites real drama.
Not only the playoff format, which has been growing on me through the last few years since we first saw it in 2014. I love the elimination aspect of it. This year with the playoff points and how that has helped drivers carry through, I think that was a good change. I wasn't necessarily completely sold on it at first, but now having seen it played out, for a guy like Martin Truex, who you could argue deserves to be in Homestead, it's great to see that he has something to make sure he's
the William Byron rule.
Yes. Well, Well, it's the William Byron and Martin Truex rule. I mean, last year he arguably, according to his competition, they all felt he should have been at Homestead last year too, but was eliminated before even the third round.
Talladega.
Blew that engine at Talladega. So, okay, let's talk Phoenix, because I firmly believe this could be the best Phoenix elimination race we have ever had. And I know we've had Newman knocking Larson out of the way, and we had Harvick in a must-win in 2014, and all this stuff. But you've got 5 guys going for one spot. That's freaking cool.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it.
And those are all guys that there's a reason why they're outside the top 4, because they're not obvious bets to win every week. But it would not surprise me if any of those 5 guys were to win.
And I would say to that point, but aside from Jimmy Johnson, who we can touch on separately, aside from Jimmy Johnson, yes, they're all sitting on the outside, but it's not because they're running horrible either. It's because this field is so close, somebody's got to be 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. Mm-hmm. They can't all be...
One of those guys, Chase Elliott, should already be in.
Right. Because
you could argue.
You could also argue that, but what I mean, to back up my point, is look at a guy like Denny Hamlin. And Denny touched on this after Texas, and I'm not sure too many people really picked up on it. And I went back and did the math. This could be the 2nd year in a row where Denny Hamlin averages inside a top 6. He said top 5. Yeah. But, Denny also said he ran 10,000 racing. So
10,001 now.
Right.
Did you see that, by the way, at Texas, the scoreboard?
I did. Somebody, Reddit posted it.
Running his 10,000th and first race.
There was some really good ones at Texas. There were some ones that made my jaw drop. But to Denny's point, last year, I believe his average finish in this round of Martinsville, Texas, and Phoenix was 6.3. And he didn't advance. 6.3 average finish is not that damn bad.
No.
Okay? His average finish going into this weekend, we've only run, obviously, 2 of the 3 races. His average finish this time around is right there. He's at that 6.0 going into Phoenix. And where is he? He's 5th, 19 points back. So, these are capable teams. They're all running very close together. They're all leading laps and performing well. But somebody's got to be on the outside looking in. And I really believe that Phoenix is going to be a phenomenal race.
I think this is a testament to the playoff point stage racing format, because we're talking about average finish, but that's kind of dismissing stage wins that different guys had, being able to score points, get inside the top 10. And Denny did not really catch fire until that win at New Hampshire. And I think he's paying the price for that right now. And so that's a testament to this format that NASCAR has come up with, because It's not about the results anymore. It's about running up front all race long.
Right, and I'm going to go here. I have my laptop. I'm going to go here and pull up a story that I did after Texas, because we're talking about average finishes and throwing in all these stage points and playoff points. You look at a guy like Truex and you talk about how well people have run. And Martin Truex, yes, he's won 700 stages. He's won just as many races, and he's led as many laps as Denny Hamlin has run races, okay? But when you dig deeper, Truex, in 8 playoff races, okay? 8 playoff races. His average, you want to take a shot at this? What do you think his average finish is in 8 playoff races?
I don't know the exact average, but I did a column on Saturday. I know in races in which he wasn't winning, he had some second places in there, and then there was Talladega.
Right.
But I would assume it's somewhere like 3-something.
His average finish in 8 playoff races is 4.8.
Yeah, and he was really, really good, because there's 2 runner-ups, right?
No, there's more than that.
Okay.
I believe. I'm gonna pull that up as well, because I want to read you these, because I don't think it really hits you until you read them. Now, his average finish is 4.8, which is impressive enough as it is. But it would be a hell of a lot better, to be honest with you, because the one shining thing on there that blemishes it is Talladega, because of the crash. He finished 23rd. If he had not finished 23rd, I believe his average finish would be, to your point, it would be something like 2.2. Because here's why. Here is Martin Truex, his finishes in 8 playoff races.
Brace yourself.
I'm telling you, no, it's going to hit you. Because it hit, every time I look at it, it hits me. Okay? So we started Chicago, 1st. New Hampshire, 5th. Dover, 4th. Charlotte first, then you throw in the Talladega. So at this point, he hasn't finished worse than 5th, okay? Kansas, first. Martinsville, second. Texas, second. He has finished no worse than 5th if you take out the wild card that is Talladega. Arguably, this is not only the best team in the playoffs, but the best team this year. Because in 34 races, his average finish is 9.9. And I'm getting loud, but it seems unfathomable. It really does. To me, it's crazy.
And yet, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Jeff Gordon's 2007 season, which was so remarkable. 30 top 10s, and when it mattered the most, he just got beat. So where I'm getting at, did Harvick's victory, passing him on the outside of One Groove, Texas, in lap traffic, was that a statement that maybe this isn't the Kyle Busch, Martin Truex 1B, 1A runaway that we thought it would be?
Yes. I thought you were going to go a different way with that question. Yes, it's a statement that this still will be, as it has been every year, it's going to be for the best guys, and any one of them can win. Which, unfortunately for Truex, I'll be the first one to say it, I don't want to put the bad juju out there, but he very well could not win the championship, and he is the regardless of what happens these next 2 weeks, Martin Truex, to me, is the 2017 driver of the year. I mean, he has been untouchable, and yet he may not win the championship.
He could be the 16-0 New England Patriots.
Right, and I understand, and I love it too. I understand we all love this playoff format because it makes great TV, it makes great content for our websites to go down to Homestead and have 4 guys straight up, points don't matter, who's ever first to the checker flag wins the championship. That's hell of exciting. But when you break it down, next Sunday night, we may all be sitting there and saying, wait a minute, the best guy did not win the championship. I'm not trying to put the bad juju out there, and I'm not trashing this format by any means, but it's a very real possibility.
Were the Giants that beat the Patriots that year, were they the better team?
In one game.
Yep.
And that's all that matters now. It's one race. But, again, you look at the overall...
Jimmy Johnson last year.
Jimmy Johnson last year was not the best
car. It was his worst statistical season up until this year,
ever. And even in Homestead, he wasn't the best car.
He was outside the top 10.
He was going to finish 3rd or 4th in the championship standings, regardless of where he finished in the race. And then the 2 best cars, arguably, was the 19 of Carl Edwards and the 22 of Joey Logano. I would probably argue that they were the best cars maybe all season. Truex was pretty good, but they crashed. And then it was between Jimmy and Kyle,
So would you call for this format to be abolished if he doesn't win?
Listen, I don't want to call for anything. I honestly don't want to trash the format because I do think it's exciting. And I think that for 35 races, we have an exciting format. We have, it's good. It really determines who the 4 best guys are. But man, it really does sometimes make you think. When we look at who our champions have been the last couple years, there's a clear difference in some cases between who's the champion, who was crowned the best for that year, and who may have been the best of the year. So I don't want to put the bad juju out there on Martin, and I don't want to rile people up that, in 10 days from now that everybody starts complaining about the format. I honest to God don't want to do that. But I wouldn't be a journalist if I didn't start thinking about those possibilities.
And I look forward to Homestead now more than ever because I look at things from a narrative standpoint as a writer too, because we know 3 of the 4. So already we can say we've got Martin Truex, that 78 team, who has been 1A. I called them a team of destiny in a column earlier this year.
They are.
And, then Kyle Busch kind of emerged as 1B. And that JGR 18 team has been really good.
Right.
And then you got Harvick, who not only did he win at Texas, but he made a statement the way that he won that race. And oh, by the way, we know what he can do at Phoenix. It's not going to matter for them on Sunday, but we know what he is capable of. And he's got the best average finish, 6.95 of all Cup drivers at Homestead Miami Speedway. So those are your 3 stories right now. And any of the other 5 guys who get in there, they've got a resume.
Right, and they will be just as good of a story.
Mm-hmm. And they're all elite.
So let's talk about those 5 guys. So the first one on the outside is, of course, Mr. Keselowski, who's a great story just because you never know what Brad's going to say from day to day. So Brad, or I should say Brad, is hanging on to the final spot. Denny Hamlin's the first guy on the outside looking in. So 19 points separates Brad and Denny. And, all right, 19 points, it sounds pretty good, 19 spots on the racetrack. But that goes out the window this year because we've got stage points, we've got stage wins, and then whatever happens in the final stage. So 19 points, I think Brad said it perfectly after Texas, it's going to be a nail-biter for his team this week. And I love that because, once again, that's what this format is for. But it's funny that he's racing Denny Hamlin for this spot because, honestly, what this makes me think of is going to Phoenix, a guy is hanging on to his championship life. And who does that remind you of?
Denny Hamlin.
In 2010.
Absolutely.
Obviously, it was a different format, but Denny Hamlin lost a championship arguably.
He did. Bottom line.
Granted, yes, Jimmy Johnson technically took the championship at Homestead. Denny was still the point leader. But in my mind, and I'm sure many people could say the same thing, Denny Hamlin lost the championship at Phoenix. And Brad Keselowski is going to be so fun to watch this week for that very same reason. Does this 2 team rise to the occasion and protect those 19 points, or do they collapse under the pressure and lose the championship?
So, to your point, this is a lot closer than what the 18 or 19 points?
19.
19, okay. It's a lot closer than the 19 points would indicate because, Brad has not exactly been at his best in Phoenix. I just pulled up the numbers here. But over the past 6 races, his average finish is, this is terrible radio, but it's 12th. He's got a 12.50 average finish over the past 6 races, the past 3 years. You go back even further, he's got a 14th place average finish all time. Now, granted, that's under 2 different versions of the racetrack. But point is, this has not been his best track.
Right.
He's going to be hanging on for dear life. And he already said it earlier this year at Talladega that he felt like Martinsville was a must-win because of how his team has struggled at downforce tracks like Texas,
yep,
and probably his own weakness at Phoenix. So we all know what Toyota's capable of any given week. Denny could chip away in the first stage. Second stage.
Technically, Denny could overtake him in both stages if he goes out and wins both stages. That's 20 points right there.
Absolutely. And so you could get down to that final stage, and all of a sudden, either Brad is having to do everything he can to keep the 11 behind him, a faster 11 car. He will be faster. That's just the reality. A faster 11 car behind him, or he's going to have to try to find some way to win this race, or make a very desperate decision, like Ryan Newman.
I'm all for it.
I love
honestly,
this.
I mean, this is...
I'm here for it.
Right. Yes. This is the pressure that we all want to see these teams be under. I want to see who can rise to the occasion. I want to see who can handle the pressure. I want to see who's going to break. I want to see who's going to be the strongest. I want 4 guys at Homestead who have gone through every emotional feeling there is possibly out there through 35 races to get to the championship.
I say all the time, the reason I do love this format is the 4 guys that get to Homestead, they've gone through the gauntlet.
They
are battle tested.
Yeah.
I don't think it works as well for trucks and Xfinity just because the parity just isn't there. But I think for Cup, this format's great.
For Cup, it is the 4 best drivers. There's no mulligans. There's no, well, this guy squeaked by. No, you either have to go out there and win your way in, or you have to be a top 3 car. Okay, and again, going back to, Denny's average finish is 6th. Hell, I'm sure plenty of guys out there would take a 6th place average finish, or take a 6th place finish, just, and Denny Hamlin may not compete for the championship. That's
and by the
amazing.
way, we're forgetting the fact that Blaney is just 21 points back.
22.
He's right, 22.
Yeah.
He's right there.
The 21 car is 22 points out. So when we start getting into Blaney, which is 22 points back, I believe Chase Elliott's 41 or 40 something points back. We're horrible. This is what we do. We just talk. We don't need stuff in front of us. So
Have you noticed how good though that 21 team has been in the playoffs? Like the difference regular season to playoffs?
Well, I've been talking about that on Sirius lately. I've been writing about it lately. They are they're like, we always used to say Matt Kenseth's nickname was Stealth Kenseth. Ryan Blaney has been Stealth Blaney in the playoffs. They are quietly good. But I'm curious, and I bring this up. So, Blaney's 22 points back. Chase Elliott's 40-something points back. Jimmy's 51 points back. Jimmy and Chase, I would argue, are in a must-win. I don't see how, without somebody blowing an engine on lap 1, that they can make up those points.
And then they'd have to jump over all the other guys on points.
Right. I don't see how you just can make up all those points. But is Blaney, you think, in that must-win situation, too?
I don't, and let me tell you why. So to my point about how they've been a completely different team during the playoffs, I keep making this mistake, and I'm not going to make it on Sunday, but I keep making this mistake during the playoffs where I'm watching the track from either the press box or I'm looking at the monitor, and I see the 21 inside the top 5 at a track where they have not been as good at during the regular season. I'm like, how do you explain this? That's surprising. That's maybe kind of fluky. I mean, I think that. I don't really believe that. But at first glance, I'm like, well, this makes no sense whatsoever. But then it starts to become a trend. It becomes a theme of the playoffs. And every single week, they're top 5, just outside the top 5. It's not going to surprise me if they're the top 5 team again on Sunday.
I completely agree. And it reminds me of Martin Truex Jr. Normally, until last year, everybody would say, well, he doesn't perform well here. He's never finished well here. He's never won a race here. But statistics don't matter anymore when it comes to a Martin Truex. And I feel like Ryan Blaney and the 21 team, they've done the same exact thing. Statistics really don't matter anymore with them because they keep going out and improving on what they had previously done and at the same time proving everybody wrong. Well, they shouldn't run well here and they shouldn't, lead laps here, and they are.
So we're playing the statistics game a lot here in this podcast. So prior to the playoffs, they were about an 18th place average finish. So during the playoffs, their results are, and they've also accumulated stage championship points. The finishes are 11th, 9th, 23rd, 8th, 18th, and this is where it gets really impressive, 3rd, 8th, and 6th. They are there, top 5.
They have turned it on in the playoffs for sure.
And obviously Bullens is good, the driver is good. That is a heck of a combination, and I think this might be kind of that moment of epiphany or awakening where we start to remember this is where Blaney became a star. He's not there yet. Right now he's considered this really young, unproven, top prospect kind of guy who's expected to emerge in his own at Team Penske proper next year. I think he might arrive sooner.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see.
How cool would that be, the 21?
That's what I was about to say. I would love to see the 21 in the Final Four, just because it's a great accomplishment for Blaney and everybody over there. It'd just be cool to see. So, tell me here, who gets the final spot? Again, any one of these guys would be a great story. Whether it's Jimmy going for 8, Chase going for his first, still hasn't won a race. He could be the 2014 version of Ryan Newman. Ryan Blaney taking the Wood brothers back to the promised land. Denny Hamlin still trying to win a championship. Brad Keselowski going for 2, as his hashtag is. Another thing, though, and I'm not rooting for anybody, of course, but what would be a cool story for me is not necessarily Brad going for a second championship, which you and I both know he talks a lot about. He wants a second championship badly. He kind of feels like, yes, 1 is great. He's proud to have done that. But it's a what have you done for me lately business.
Well, he said during the championship media day, one line that really stuck out to me is he said, your legacy is not determined by what you do once. It's what you do over and over. Right,
and that's what I mean. He has said that to me quite a few times. 1 is nice, but 2 would be better. I want to do it again. I want to show people I could do it again. But here's another thing that I think would make a great story is we get to Homestead, we get to Media Day, which is slated for one week from tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday, so it's slated for next Thursday. The 4 drivers are going to be up there. They're going to do the press conferences. They're going to do their one-on-ones. They're going to do TV, radio. They're going to go through the gauntlet. And then you get to the racetrack Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Brad Keselowski has not experienced that. He hasn't been at Homestead under this format. He hasn't done Championship 4. I'm using air quotes as if everybody can see me. He hasn't done Championship 4 Media Day. He hasn't been up there with somebody like a Kevin Harvick who is going to go down there and start playing mind games with people.
We missed that last year.
Right, and I will admit I can't wait for that. But getting back to Brad, he hasn't experienced that. He hasn't experienced being up there with 3 other guys. He hasn't gone through everything to go through Thursday. Then you have to get to the racetrack and go through everything on Friday. And there's going to be cameras everywhere. And we're still going to be asking questions. Yes, he's raced for a championship before. But from what I can remember, when he got to Homestead in 2012, he pretty much had that title locked up.
Yeah.
So from a story perspective, I would love to see how that unfolds.
If there was a guy,
somebody like a Brad Keselowski, how he handles that.
Of the remaining guys who are eligible to take that 4th spot, isn't he the best equipped to be mentally prepared though? Because think about it.
But
Chase,
is he?
I think he is. Let me tell you why. So Chase, second-year driver, he beats himself up when things go wrong. So when you're under that pressure cooker of Championship Media Day and people are taking shots at you, I don't know how Chase would react to that. Same thing with Blaney. Blaney isn't as perceived to be as easily shaken, but I don't know. Denny has proven that you can get under his skin and you can make him shake a little bit.
I think you used to be able to get under his skin. I mean, he was here in, 15? He
has gone through it before.
So he's gone through this before. I think 2015 probably served him well. So if he gets to Homestead and we go through this with him next week, I would expect to see a different type of Denny Hamlin. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
I think that there was once upon a time when Brad and Jimmy kind of had their little feud where the 48 team would do things just to get under the 2 teams' skin. I remember going to the Brickyard once and they were kind of beside each other. And they put the barrier up between them.
The infamous Lowe's signage everywhere.
Yeah, and they blocked what the 2 teams could see.
Yeah.
And Brad came to the media and said, this is their mind games and I'm not going to put up with it, which is proof that it was getting to him, right? I haven't heard a lot of that.
I miss that.
Oh, I do too.
I miss that in this sport where people would play mind games. And I think about it not only because you mentioned it, but again, I was talking to Tony Gibson earlier today. And, Gibson used to be a part of that when he worked at Hendrick Motorsports. Ray Evernham perfected that. Ray Evernham would pull the 24 in and cover it up during practice, not because they were good, but he knew he could mess with everybody else. So it would be interesting, again, to see how a Brad or a Denny, and then, of course, the young guys like a Ryan and a Chase would handle it. So, and Jimmy's Jimmy. Jimmy's not going to be on fade.
No. And I think you would agree with me. That's one of my favorite press conferences of the year, too, because it's always a different dynamic. Because their personalities shine more on that day than I think they do all year because they have nothing to lose now.
They have nothing to lose, and, I wouldn't say that they're laid back. I would actually say the opposite. I think you really start to see what they're made of because they've now this is what everybody's been waiting for. This is what we go every week. This is why we are here. This is the weekend. And Thursday is the first opportunity where you really get to see it sit, kind of set in for them that this is championship weekend.
The only thing I would change about it, I'm curious where you stand on this, I want the crew chiefs there too. I want the team.
Curious.
I want the quarterback and I want the head coach.
And normally, there has been times in the past where it would be car owners, crew chiefs, and then the drivers. And then it kind of, we've had where, Monday or Tuesday afternoon, it's been, well, we're going to have a teleconference with the car owners. And then the next day we'll do one with the crew chiefs. So, yeah, media days only become like a driver-only thing.
But it's better, though, when you get them side by side. Make them see each other.
That would be cool. We may need to fire off some emails here. See, this is what happens. We start talking and we just come up with ways to
isn't the Super Bowl media days always fun? Because you've got Bill Belichick able to play his mind games and whoever he's facing.
You got coaches there, the players are there, everybody's there. So, they can't be working on the cars. It's Thursday. Sit them up on the stage and let everybody start firing pot shots at each other. And to this point too, we talk about, a Kevin, he's been through this before and whatnot. Let's not forget, Martin Truex has been through this before. He was here, I say here, he was in this position in 2015, but he was the underdog. Nobody expected him to go out and win that championship.
And he was off the pace, too.
Right.
The other guys.
So, honestly, this is going to be kind of new. He's going to say it's not, but let's be honest. This is going to be new for him because he's going down there as, to some people, the favorite. He's going down there as the guy whose championship it is to lose. In
2015, they snuck in through the back door. And this year, they walked to the front door, kicked it in, and they were there first.
Yeah, they've been there for 10 weeks, just waiting for everybody else to show up.
They've had an open house.
Right. So I'm curious also, once again talking about storylines, how does Truex handle it next week? How does he take it? And I'm sure he's going to say, well, I've been here before, I've done this. No, it's different. It is different because you are the favorite. You are the guy that everybody says right now has their hand pressed up against the trophy, and you're just waiting for somebody to say, okay, you can take it, it's yours.
So are they the favorite, though? And let me ask you, here's the reason why. Let's say either Brad or Jimmy, somehow, they get in. Those other guys have championships. Here's the guy that's the favorite, and he's the one guy that doesn't have one.
Well, and that's the thing. If, let's say, the Final Four stays what it is right now. Let's say Brad gets that last spot. So Brad, Kevin, and Kyle, they've got championships.
Recent championships.
Right. Truex doesn't. Let's say that, like you said, Jimmy takes the final spot. He's got a championship. Everybody but Truex has a championship. So...
Is he the favorite? As you stand right now, is he the favorite?
Oh, as of right now...
I'm putting the gun to you.
Okay, so as of right now, going into Phoenix, we still haven't seen how Phoenix has played out. Yes, he's still the favorite to me. And look, he said it after Texas. Everybody's going to say, oh, well, Kevin beat you at Texas, and as Martin said, all this voodoo stuff. But no, I still don't believe in that right now. I think, hey, you can't win them all, regardless of how easy the 78 makes it look.
And to his point... That race meant way more to the 4 than it did to the 78.
The 4 was looking to make a statement, and they did.
And the 78 is just trying to get there. Whether it's win, finish second, either way you get in.
The 78 was just trying to win a race. So, I think he's still the favorite.
But the fact that you can question who the favorite is what makes this so awesome.
Right. And 10, 12, 15 weeks ago, we weren't. It was very clear. Mm-hmm. We were ready to just engrave the trophy with Truex and go home.
You want to crown their ass? Yes. Well, then crown them.
Yes. You know what? I've had that saying in my mind for a long time. Well, a lot the past couple weeks, I should say. It was going through my mind the last 100 laps at Martinsville when everybody was talking about what the victory lane celebration for Chase Elliott was going to be, and we still had 150 laps to go.
And we're still waiting.
We're still waiting, yes. So, all right, so now you tell me, going back to my original question, who gets the last spot? I think Brad will hang on to it.
Yeah, I think the 4 we have, the 4 that we're going to keep.
I think it'll be close.
I think it'll be close. I think the 11 is going to score a bunch of stage points.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be 19, 20, 50-something points, but I think he hangs on to it.
I think both of those teams are good enough to both run inside the top 10. And here's the deal. Even if the 11 is in the top 5, as long as the 2 stays in the top 10, it's going to mitigate how much of an advantage, how many points the 11 team can gain on the 2. So short of the 11 winning, I just don't see where it's going to happen on points.
And, of course, somebody could jump up there and win. But that would make it even more of the fun. So, but, I just don't see that happening for some reason.
I think it would be so very fascinating, though, if Brad, who is one of the smartest guys in the garage, if he became prophetic in saying that he thought Martinsville was must win, and in hindsight he does lose by a point or 2, and it comes back to Martinsville was a must win.
Yeah, we should have recorded a podcast after Martinsville because there was certainly a lot to talk about. I was fired up after Martinsville.
How much fun was that?
Not only because I said something on Twitter that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I was just fired up in general about Martinsville and just.
Which tweet was that?
You're gonna make me bring it up again. I'm gonna get hate tweets after people listen to this.
Yeah, no.
So just the comment about the race fan. I mean, we're assuming he was a race fan that went after Denny.
Oh, yeah, okay, I saw that. You're not wrong.
Well, people didn't like my choice of words, so and I admit, I could have used a different word, but I was hot. I was hot just because, you and I have a separate conversation. We always talk about people who get on pit road, but I was just fired up in general about Martinsville. There was a lot of things that developed over those last 100 laps.
So because I captured that video, I just want to add in my 2 cents there too.
Once again, this is my podcast. We can keep going. We can talk about whatever.
I appreciate fans' enthusiasm. They're the reason we have jobs.
Oh, for sure.
They read our stuff. They keep us engaged. That's awesome. I love that fans, to a certain degree, have access to the garage area. I like that you can walk through the paddock area, the garage area, and see up close what people do. You never have the right to go get into a competitor's face. You could not do that in any other professional sport walk of life.
Yeah.
And so my frustration there is, don't be the guy that cost other fans that opportunity. I'm not criticizing all fans. I'm criticizing one fan who could have potentially cost all fans that access.
And that was my tweet. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, most people just took it as I was talking about fans in general. I was talking about one fan, but that's beside the point.
I think when you tweeted that, a lot of people hadn't seen the video yet, and so they interpreted that wrong.
And rightly so. Fans get defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's their access, and some of them think that no matter what they're right, but it didn't.
I think the context was lost in translation.
It didn't play over well, but regardless. So Homestead, we're talking about Homestead.
Well, we kind of have.
I mean, yeah.
I'm looking forward to it for multiple reasons. One, I often get accused...
For the nap that comes on Monday?
For the beach time that comes on Monday. I love that beach day. I often get accused of, being a intermediate track hater. And my automatic rebuttal is...
I never knew
is
that.
Homestead Miami Speedway. That place is so wonderful.
It's
and it
perfect.
has been for a long time.
It's perfect.
It's this perfect blend between Rockingham and Darlington.
It's
scenic, it's
southern,
racing.
Yeah, it's southern Florida. A perfect word. That's what I was going for. It's southern Florida. It's scenic. You start in the day, you end under twilight.
I think all big tracks.
It's just perfect.
All big tracks should be built close to the ocean, because you see it with Auto Club too. There's something about that salted air, the humidity. It kind of bakes that salty air onto the racetrack.
Well, granted, sometimes you go down there and it's hot as hell.
Sure,
but
that makes for good racing too,
right,
though.
But just speaking from a racetrack perspective, a lot of people say, oh, well, we should end the season here, there, or there. No.
There's no other place I'd rather be than Miami.
Yes, and I wrote this a couple years ago. Homestead has developed perfectly. They've done a great job not only developing the racetrack and the area around it and the fan zone and all that stuff, but it's the racetrack itself has come into its own.
He's won there. He's
when it was a flat track, maybe
but
not
the fact
so much.
that he
but when
won
they
at
redid
Texas,
it,
which is
it's
Martin
perfect.
Truex Jr.'s house.
We live in
a
an era
sense.
that has so many of the D-shaped
1.5 mile track.
mile and a halves. And I think that's my frustration. I think those configurations, not the length of the track, not the size of the track,
because
that
all
configuration
the
is just not good for stock car racing.
We don't have the speed.
It's
We're not
awesome
fast
for
enough.
IndyCar.
And you go,
but I think
Kevin Harvick
Homestead
goes to a
is the
high-speed
big track
racetrack and beats
for stock cars.
the best
I think the
guy
surface is
on a high
aged
speed
and it automatically
racetrack.
ages. You could pave it
So,
tomorrow, and then by the time we came back next year, I think it would already age in just because of the weather.
And that's what makes him a
hurricanes go
legitimate
through there and
contender.
batter
Because if he
it,
would've won
precipitation.
everybody
I just
would've
can't
been
wait
like,
for
well,
forget
he was
the
supposed to win
championship.
Phoenix.
That's always a good
moments
race.
like this.
Yes. Well, that was
You
what I was
get
going to say.
surprised because it's like,
One of my
where
points
did he
is
come
you've
from?
got
To go back to,
drivers in the bottom, the
Darrell
middle, up
Waltrip-ism.
against the wall.
But
People
as
are,
Rodney Childers pointed out
they get
after
runs
the
on each
race,
other all over the
this
place.
wasn't
But
out
at
of
the same
nowhere. This
time,
wasn't
be
a
careful
shock.
because
It
you may
wasn't a
slide up
surprise.
and make contact
He
with somebody.
said they unloaded
It's just
at Dover, and they
it's
didn't get the
perfect.
result.
You've got to manage your tires. If you
yeah,
use them up
just,
early, you're
uh,
going backwards.
Dover.
let's
And
stop
he
talking
and
about
Kevin both
look. There's a
said,
lot of things I would
"We're
like to do
back."
to the schedule.
And then they came to Charlotte. And were
Going
really
to
good
Vegas for
there.
the championship race
And
is not one of them.
Right moment where
Lee
finally the whole
Homestead,
package came together.
Yes, it
shout
goes
out
back
to everybody
to
at
the whole
Homestead Miami
Dover
Speedway.
conversation.
Great
was
facility,
Kevin
great people,
said,
and
I
I
can
can't
feel
wait to
it.
get back. I
It's
didn't
all about
get to go last
we hear
year,
drivers say it all
while
the
I was
time.
working for
It's all
NBC,
about what the
and
feel
I
and the
missed
balance
it.
is. If they can
just,
feel it in
it's
their
just a
butt
good
in the seat.
weekend. It's a
And
good facility.
Harvick had said, this reminded him of
So
2014,
I guess with Homestead,
2015.
to put
then
a
they go
wrap
to
on
Charlotte,
Homestead,
another
we
mile
know
and a half,
Truex,
high-speed
Kyle Busch, and
racetrack,
Kevin Harvick
and he
are
finishes
going.
third.
we still
and
have
suddenly
to decide
it's like, well,
the
maybe
fourth
they
driver.
have something here.
But
so that's
what
why
does
I
your
think
gut
Texas
say
is
right
such a
now?
big
Are you
deal.
taking,
is
you know,
because
who's
he
the
wasn't
champion? One of those
supposed to be
three,
fast.
or
He's not.
you know,
He wasn't
the
supposed
other.
to win the race.
And
what I'm saying
I wrote it
is
on Sunday night, and
this isn't, well, it's a
I hate
newly
to feel
paved
like I'm a
racetrack
knee-jerk guy,
where,
because I accuse
you can
people
maybe
all
hit
the
on
time.
something before someone
Don't be a
else
knee-jerk
does.
guy.
Listen.
Let things soak
Big
in.
notebook
Listen,
because it's
you
a
want to talk
different
about knee-jerk?
configuration.
I
This wasn't
wrote
a
in
one-off.
June
We've now seen a
that
solid
Martin
month
Truex was going
of
to
them making the
Homestead.
jump from
Okay,
being
you want to talk about
top five,
you know,
fringe
talk
top
about
five,
knee-jerk.
Because I had to find the
competing
story
for
to link
wins.
back
They've
to
now
it.
made
My
that
column
final
was
jump to be where you have to be
something
to
along
win
the
a
lines of,
championship.
it's not
Tony said
it's not
today, he
official.
said,
Go ahead, pencil
"I've
him
seen
in
this
because he's
movie
going
before."
in.
Yeah.
In
And here we are.
2015,
He's
it
there.
doesn't end well for anyone
With
else.
that
Tony's
said,
been
I
saying
just
that
feel
since
like
Sunday night. I mean, he
the
really
statement that
believes
14 made
that they are in
and
a
the
very
pedigree
good spot.
and how good they are at
again, I keep
Homestead,
mentioning
hell of
Tony
a
Gibson,
statement.
and,
I think
everybody will
that
hear this next week.
it's going. I think it's going to be between those
Tony
two.
Gibson
Yeah,
said the
you
same
know,
thing.
it would have
Tony
been one
said
thing
he
if
actually
Harvick went
told
out and won
Harvick
this weekend
that
at
you know,
Phoenix.
that this
let's,
is his
let's
year.
say
If
Truex
he,
won
if he makes it to
Texas.
Homestead, according to Tony
if
Gibson,
Harvick
he
had
said to
gone
Harvick,
out
if
and
you make
won
it to
Phoenix,
Homestead, you're going to win
I think the conversation would
so
be different.
they're very
Because
confident
everybody
over
would be
there.
like, well, he's
Stewart-Haas
supposed to win
Racing.
Phoenix. He's won there
So,
8,000 times.
They're also very confident at JGR
Yeah.
and Furniture Road too, and that's what
And
makes
you know
this
what?
awesome.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's what makes it a whole lot of fun. Do we want to do some of the Twitter questions, or do we want to talk wrestling and then end with some Twitter questions, or is there other stuff we need to talk about?
I think we covered most of the topics, the narrative.
Yeah.
So if you want to hop into some Q&A, and then we can close this out with the Nature Boy, woo, Ric Flair.
It was very good, by the way, as I take a minute here to scroll and find some of the stuff. I know one of the questions, it was directed toward you, and I started laughing because I said, well, this is my podcast, so I'm going to answer it as well once I find it. So let me go into Twitter here and get some of these questions. The one that I wanted to start with was that was addressed to you was, can you ask Matt how he got into writing and racing? And that is from Howie Foreman. And again, I'll let you answer, and then I'm going to answer it because it's my podcast.
Okay, so, and I think we should do this for both of them, because I think the questions are really good, because we have two very different backgrounds and perspectives, and I think that answering into these questions with our respective backgrounds is good, because there's more than one pathway into racing, or there's more than one right way to analyze racing. So as far as my personal background, I grew up in a racing family. My grandpa raced, my dad raced, I raced karts and bandoleros, and like we talked about earlier in the show, racing gets really expensive in a hurry. And even at that level, looking at a legend car, people are spending today on legends what some teams are spending in late models. And my family just ain't that well-to-do. You know, I grew up in the boonies in Alabama. My closest Walmart's 35 minutes away. And the town I grew up in doesn't even have a city hall. We're policed by the neighboring city. So, not very well to do. I decided that I was going to go to college, and I had kind of like given up on racing a little bit, because like a lot of racers, when you spend, for me, 5 or 6 years racing something, and then it becomes apparent that you can't race anymore, I kind of rejected it. I even spent 2 years not even really watching, because I just couldn't think of being a fan without being able to go to a racetrack on a Saturday night and do dirt racing. So I went to school, the University of South Alabama, and I eventually became the sports editor of the student paper, and I was doing stick and ball sports, baseball, basketball. Our Division I football program was born during my tenure there, and I had the opportunity to start writing for a NASCAR blog on the SB Nation network. It was called NASCAR Ranting and Raving, and I'm going to beg all of you not to look up my name in NASCAR Ranting and Raving, because I'm embarrassed by
that was
70...
What? NASCAR Ranting and Raving?
NASCAR Ranting and Raving,
okay.
the Forever 3 blog.
I remember it. I read it.
And my content there is so awful. You know, to quote Matt Hardy, I just want to delete, and I can't. But I got a chance to write for an SB Nation blog, and that's how I met Jeff Gluck. Jeff Gluck was there before he was jeffgluck.com, and he took me under his wing. I'm so grateful to Jeff. So the answer here, to kind of tie all this together, you got to have a love for racing. You got to be willing to do whatever it takes to get to the racetrack. Do the work, write stories. Don't try to be a social media celebrity. To be able to get a job means you have to work, and you have to work hard. You have to make the right connections, and be willing to make some sacrifices. Be willing to give up certain luxuries. It's kind of a famous story, but
like eating,
like eating.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. I mean, we've shared an apartment before when we're all struggling, and you get by week to week. So to me, you have to be willing to do that. I slept in my truck in rest areas going to races. I would shower in Walmart bathrooms by just taking water and kind of splashing it all over me.
Yeah.
And so I say that not to be showy. I'm very proud that I kind of embody this racer mentality, that you do whatever you can, roll your pennies, and get to the racetrack. And so for me, I was able to pick up some freelancing gigs, Associated Press, USA Today. We basically built Popular Speed. We were the foundation together, you and I, at that website. I'm so very proud of what we accomplished.
Yeah,
it was
good times.
The content there speaks for itself.
And at the time, that was a platform that we needed, and I feel like you and I, we certainly put it to good use.
And I think that what we did there was noticed, because I also was at Racer too. And so I think Racer noticed what Popular Speed was. I think Auto Week noticed what Popular Speed was. And you just keep trying to grow the brand and do work and make more contacts and be trusted by your audience.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my perspective. We share some backgrounds.
Yes,
so what about you?
And I echo all of those sentiments, and I was in the same boat where you go to any platform that you can find because you start to try to use your voice and get your name heard and your work seen and things like that. In terms of how I got into racing was with the death of Dale Earnhardt. Some people know this story. My dad was a race fan when he was younger, back when, Richard Petty and Rusty Wallace and Dale Earnhardt, all those guys were the faces of the sport. When I came along, he was more of a casual fan, but just like a casual football fan, everybody knows what the Super Bowl is. And, he watched the Daytona 500. Dale Sr. passed, and that was all I heard about. I was 11 years old. That's all I heard about was Dale Sr. passing and what the first race at Daytona was going to be like that July. And long story short, that was the first race I watched. In terms of the writing, how I combine these two, it's kind of funny. I went to school, and in high school, I was kind of determined that I was going to be a criminalist because I was, back then, CSI was the big hit, and I was obsessed with all those CSI shows, and I was of course they exaggerate what life as a criminalist is like, but I was like, well, that's cool, I'm gonna go do that. So I took, all the science classes in high school, and I was really into that. And then about my sophomore year, I at that point was so hooked on racing that I started to write a little bit on the side just for myself and showed it to a few teachers, and they're like, well, you need to go write for the school newspaper. You really, not to pat myself on the back, but honestly, this is how the course turned. They started telling me that I had something here and I should, run with it in a sense. So, and then again, after that, I went to college for journalism, and at the same time I was in college, I started writing for Bleacher Report because they had just kind of come out and were starting to make a name for themselves. At the time, anybody could log in or sign up and create an account, which was good and bad. And from there it was, just using any platform you could. And I moved down to North Carolina literally with nothing. I had no job. I had no source of income. I had Popular Speed at that time. That's where I was at. And I just said, I need to come down here and take a chance. And started living off of $400 a month, and somehow made it work. So, long story short on that one.
I want to go back to something you said about the crime shows. how well do you think a CSI...
Which I'm still obsessed with, by the way.
So, to that point, how well do you think a CSI laser inspection station would go over?
Oh, good point. See, this is what happens. We just start talking and suddenly all of these...
Because there's 7 spin-off
ideas.
shows. Hell, there is a CSI Internet or something, right?
Yeah, there's everything.
So CSI NASCAR.
Although I'm more into Criminal Minds nowadays. CSI, they killed off so many characters and other characters left. It's just not the same.
Fans think that everyone who fails LIS is a cheater. So,
well, listen,
crew chiefs are Criminal Minds.
That could be a whole... Nicely done. That could be a whole separate podcast just on the term cheating. But that's a good point. Maybe add that to the list of emails we should send during the off season to keep the NASCAR folks busy. Scotty Styles 29, otherwise known as Harvick for the Cup 30. I like that. 29 for 30. I like this question because I'm going to try to expand upon it a lot during the off season. He asked how will Chevy do with the new nose? If we had to guess, will they close the gap to Toyota? And let me start because I do want to expand on this in the offseason. I'm really hoping to actually talk with Chevrolet's Jim Campbell before, hopefully at Homestead, if all goes according to plan, and to air that during the offseason. And that's what I want to talk about. I really want to dig into this new Chevy body because it's not just the nose. I mean, it's a whole body. It's a whole different car. It's not the Chevy SS. It is the Chevy Camaro. That's not just the nose. And when I went to Detroit, when they did the announcement, I talked to every single Chevrolet driver who was there. And every single one of them said, this car is going to get us back to where we need to be. They really felt like the aerodynamics of this car and the downforce that the car was going to produce, they really felt like that was going to up Chevrolet's game. So that's my short answer is I think if the drivers are right, and if Jim Campbell, what he told us that day in Detroit back in August, I think it'll be a good thing for Chevrolet because they have not had a car over the last couple years, so they are in desperate need of one. And in terms of will they close the gap to Toyota? Yes, I think if it's the same answer. If it's going to do well for them, I think that's going to help with the competition.
So what stands out to me, and a lot of fans picked up on this immediately, and I did too, is that the new Chevy Camaro body shares a lot of similarities to the current Toyota Camry. And I think, everyone's learning. Everyone picks up on what others are doing, and then they incorporate it. Then someone else builds a better mousetrap, and then everyone else incorporates that too. I think Chevrolet next year, if they've done their due diligence and homework, and they always do, I think they're going to come out of the gates really hot. And I think, true to form, the other teams are going to do their homework, and they're going to find certain advantages and close the gap. I think NASCAR will try to do their own as well. And NASCAR is going to try to police it to the best of their ability. There are going to be dyno tests, usually in May. NASCAR is going to see what the horsepower numbers are. And I think that we should not be sold on what we see in the first 4 or 5 months of the year, because there's always that catch-up period. But yes, I think that early on, Chevrolet is going to have a lot more speed than they've showed this year, and then the other teams in NASCAR is going to try to play that parity card.
Yeah, I really think this is going to be a good thing. Going back to what I had said before, Chevy has not had a car in a couple years now, so I don't see why it wouldn't be a good thing.
Do you think you could make the case that Chevy is currently third on the totem pole? After dominating the sport for so many years. I mean, I know Ford and Roush had that really good run of success, and now Toyota's on top. But could you make the case they're third? And this is where I'm getting at. Right now, Toyota is clearly number one on the pecking order.
Oh, for sure.
Ford Performance has clearly upped their resources, their commitment. They brought in Stewart-Haas Racing in the fold. Team Penske, that 22 team was a team to beat for the past 3 years.
I mean, that's an anomaly right now. So let's just say Joey runs like Joey's supposed to run. So yeah, you factor in, well, they got Stewart-Haas, they got Team Penske.
You look at the past 4 years or so as a window.
Yeah, you could probably make that argument.
And now this is Chevrolet's attempt to get back on top. So it's like a constant shuffling of the deck.
Yeah.
And I think this is Chevy's effort now to go from third back to first, and we're going to see how it works out.
Absolutely. So a good friend to both of us, Josh Weinrich, of course wants.
I know this question.
Yeah, he wants to know what it's going to take to get us to go to a Crown Jewel Dirt late model race. But he did say he's a big fan of the show. I don't know if he's listened to the show, but he gets brownie points for.
We're a show wherever we go. Like, we are a walking, talking, rolling show.
You know, the reason that I wanted to do this is not only because I didn't have a guest for this week. I say that with love. Just because we have both said on Twitter numerous times, people who follow us religiously, I guess you could say, they know. I mean, this is what we do. We just sit here and talk racing. And we finally smartened up and said, you know what, let's just put some microphones on and do what we always do. So it's not the cleanest podcast in a sense of,
and we've done this before.
Well, that's what I mean.
In various forms.
That's what I mean. This is what we do. So it's not a typical, clean-cut podcast. We're talking over each other, and we're getting riled up here, and we're stuttering, and there's going to be some dead air, but I don't care, because this is the whole point of it.
Well, this is Water Cooler Kelly and Water Cooler Matt.
Yeah.
Talking about Water Cooler Dale.
Yeah. Which, he took that literally this weekend, or last weekend, but... yeah, this was the point of the podcast, is just, shoot the breeze about talk racing, talk life. We're going to talk wrestling. So we're ignoring Josh's question.
I think that pretty much sums up probably both of our answers.
We're too distracted to even...
Shall I go first?
Go ahead. I don't have an answer. I really don't.
I would tell Josh that, I'm a NASCAR guy, I'm an IndyCar guy, I'm a short track guy, and I haven't quite made time for dirt. And my go-to answer, and it always pisses off dirt guys, is that I'm not a potato farmer.
Yeah.
I don't have time to farm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against it. I honestly am not. I mean, I know we have a track here in Charlotte, which looks fantastic, and I know a lot of people talk about, but it's just, I have to admit, it's just not something that I have seriously said, you know what, I'm going to go to a dirt race today. So, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. I think I've watched dirt races. I think they're great, but yeah, I don't.
So let me clarify before, Dirt Nation, starts to send me hate mail and blows up my mentions on Twitter. I've got no problem with dirt. I love the competition.
Oh, same here.
Especially, sprint cars on dirt is a sight to behold. So the reality for me is in my current role at Auto Week, I've got to do NASCAR. I do a lot of IndyCar. Sometimes I get sent to IMSA races. I got sent to F1 Austin a couple of weeks ago. I run shorttrackscene.com. A cheap plug, as Mick Foley would say.
Cheap pop,
cheap pop, yeah. So when you start to look at how invested I am and what I'm invested in racing, you just start to run out of time. And I finally got a LucasOilRacing.tv subscription this year, and I've loved every single dollar that I've spent on that, because I've watched a ton of Lucas Oil Dirt Late Model Racing, because that's all available on demand. So I can do what I do on weekends and come home on a random Tuesday or Wednesday and catch up on the Lucas Oil Dirt Tour. And I love the characters, the personalities. There's a lot of things that people do in dirt racing that asphalt, short track racing, and even NASCAR needs to look at. My biggest frustration with NASCAR right now is that the Busch Series became what is now the Xfinity Series. The Truck Series has evolved more to a big track racing series. And as a result, NASCAR has now become Major League, AAA, AA, Single A. And as a result, veterans are gone. You've got 16-year-olds through 20-year-olds trying to move up the quote-unquote ladder. And as a result, the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series has lost a lot of its personality. You've lost the Ron Hornadays, you've lost the Mike McLaughlins, you've lost the Ed Barriers, you've lost the Todd Bodines, you've lost... I can count veterans forever, the guys who were the stars in the 90s, and they've all been replaced by... I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but I'm being very blunt. You've replaced these guys who have had 20 years worth of character development with teenagers, and you just cannot get invested into teenagers. And so when I watched Lucas Oil Dirt Racing, there are guys who have been around for years, and the fans are wearing their T-shirts. They're invested in their lives and their stories. And I just wish right now that NASCAR had that series that was not Cup, that had those veterans.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because from what I don't think I've missed any. I think this is the last question. Like I said, I don't think I've missed any here. The Wilsum 429 wants to know, what can NASCAR do to bridge the gap between big league super late model racing and trucks and Xfinity? And of course, this is your area of expertise, so I'm going to let you run with that. But I will say, just the way that the question is phrased, what can NASCAR do to bridge the gap between super late model racing and trucks and Xfinity? I don't think that they care to do that. That's not really their area. They're focused on NASCAR, so I don't think, and again, I'll let you speak to this, but I don't think that they can do anything, because I don't think they want to do anything.
They can, and there are people in the office who care a lot. They have an entire office dedicated to regional and touring that manages the NASCAR Weekly All-American Series, K&N Pro East and West, the Whelen Modified Tour, even Mexico and Euro. So they have an investment in grassroots racing. But the pivotal point in history where NASCAR's investment became strong to weak was a passing of someone I think both of us hold in high regard, Jim Hunter. Jim Hunter was NASCAR's champion for short track racing, and he believed that the key to NASCAR's success ultimately lied within the short track racing community, because that's where your stars are. Not only your future stars, not just kids, but also veterans who could come in and run the truck series. And so I think that when the thing that I talked about before happened, where NASCAR restructured to become a ladder system, you lost that connection to grassroots fans, and it became all about the kids. So to me, what NASCAR really needs to do to really make a big gain on saving itself. Not that NASCAR is dying, but it's struggling when it comes to maintaining fans. You've got to have that series that has people that you're invested in. Because as it stands now, I'm a big IndyCar guy. IndyCar's got a very strong ladder system that has money in it, but no one cares. No one wants to watch Indy Lights on TV. They have a tape-delayed TV package. No one wants to watch Pro Mazda or USF 2000 because these are teenagers. But I think that, maybe more so me because you came in during the 2000s, but my favorite thing about NASCAR when I was a kid and a teenager was the old Busch series, because you had Mark Martin come in and run races. You had Dale Earnhardt come in and run races on certain tracks. But you had races in the Busch series that ran separate. Hickory, South Boston, Fairground Speedway Nashville, IRP, Nazareth, Pikes Peak, that created its own personality. And you had stars who have been around for 20 years that fans were invested in and wanted to watch. And currently, under the current model, NASCAR doesn't have that anymore. The closest thing they have is the Whelen Modified Tour, which those guys have been running it for decades. And that series is really healthy. And I just think of what that would be like on a national scale. The Truck Series could really be that. It was always that. Up until 5 years ago when Hornaday finally quit, was forced out. Todd Bodine was forced out. People cannot get invested in teenagers. And I cover a lot of them in super late model racing. But those guys are struggling to get attention too, because, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it's hard to get invested or to relate in what amounts to a wealthy kid buying a late model, buying a truck ride, buying an Xfinity ride, and going racing. You can't relate to that. There has to be a series where veterans who weren't good enough, capable, or wealthy enough to go to Cup, who could still become stars. And NASCAR used to have that in the 90s. Stars who were not in the Cup Series. And now, unless you're in the Cup Series, you don't matter. And NASCAR has conditioned fans, drivers, media, everyone, that unless you're in Cup, you don't matter. And that's not healthy for the entire stock car racing spectrum.
Yeah. Once again, that's your area of expertise. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. But the way the question was phrased, it's just that's not something that NASCAR is going to do. So
I think they're going to be forced to. I think the spec motor deal in the Truck Series is going to force them to evaluate how that series is operated. I think that it's not going to be feasible to put these trucks through the wind tunnel as often and to try to run on Cup tracks. I do think there's a lot of talk about moving towards something a little bit different for trucks and make it more of the alternative brand. It started with Eldora and Gateway.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see a lot more of that.
The Truck Series is a great series. You know, a separate conversation, but I think a lot needs to be done in the Xfinity Series. You know, to give NASCAR credit, they are trying. They keep changing the rules with, you know, what Cup drivers can do and things like that. I also think the schedule needs to be worked on, just throwing that out there. I think budget is a big problem as well, and maybe even the race cars themselves, but that's a whole separate conversation. So is there anything other racing related wise that do you feel good about where we're at right now? Do we need to talk anything else?
No, I'm having a lot of fun right now, and I know I just kind of went on a negative rant there. I love stock car racing. I love NASCAR. You know, the big topic of conversation on social media yesterday was, if you love it, you can't criticize it. And I think that's completely wrong.
You just have to be fair about it.
Right.
You know, you can criticize it, just don't completely tear it down and set it on fire.
And like I said earlier today,
that's my feeling on it.
I'm looking forward to Phoenix and Homestead. I love this championship format.
I think we're both pumped up. I hope everybody else is pumped up because I don't know what else we could ask for.
Agreed.
It's we've got the best teams, best drivers, everybody that are left. I mean, that are contending for this. We've got entertaining races. The racing even the racing has not been bad.
Stage racing has been hugely beneficial.
You know,
to NASCAR.
Texas was it didn't set the world on fire, but it wasn't a bad race
either. It was
either.
100 miles too long. The first stage was
right,
exciting.
but I'm
I'm
talking about the racing in general.
Yeah.
I felt Chicago was a good race. Charlotte was entertaining just because for some reason those guys didn't have a handle on the track. You see guys like Kyle Busch are losing it. So the racing in the playoffs has been very good. So we feel good about all the racing we've just discussed. And I know there's plenty more that we can, but for where we are right now at this present day, we're good. Do you want to talk Ric Flair?
Yeah, all I was going to say was, I was trying to give you a segue, but you took it from me. I was going to say, you know, all I've got to say about Homestead and the rest of the season is, to be the man, you've got to beat the man.
Well,
segue.
That is true. That is true. Well, all right, so let's talk about Ric Flair, because once again, we can talk about whatever we want. And I have seen the 30 for 30. I have been waiting for that for months. I had it marked on my calendar. I made sure that my work schedule, like everything, I just made sure I was home. And it's funny because Chris, my boyfriend, you know, he's very techy. He's in all the tech latest and greatest stuff. He thought last night was a good night to go out and buy like new routers and different stuff. I can't even explain it.
That's
because
the most Chris story
well,
possible.
I mean, not just routers, but something to where something gets plugged into one room and then there's something that goes to the TV so then he can play movies without going to his computer. I have no idea. But he felt like last night was a good time to do that. And I missed a portion of SmackDown because of it, because he was unplugging and plugging stuff in and on the phone with all these people. He's having a blast, as you know. He loves that. He literally told me it was Christmas for him yesterday, which means he's not getting anything for Christmas, if that's the case. But he finished doing all of that and finally got the TV back on right at 9:59 when Ric Flair was about to come on.
Speaking of Christmas, have you decorated?
No.
Thank God.
I have not.
Too soon, Kelly. Way too soon.
Well, but here's the thing. Listen, I feel like I should. Because while Chris was on his shopping spree last night, he said, "Well, I got you something too." Okay. What'd you get me? He got me a dancing Snoopy. Which is more for him because he's a big Snoopy fan, but he says it's for me. And it was the dancing Christmas Snoopy, and I said, if you're going to keep talking about Christmas, I'm going to decorate. And unfortunately for him, he is going to Phoenix. I am not, which means I'm going to be home. So he may come back on Monday, and it's going to be decorated. But anyway, Ric Flair.
I would just say, because we've had a lot of spirited conversation about when to decorate for Christmas.
Yes.
And my only umbrage with this was today was the first day where it felt like winter. Yesterday was 78 degrees.
People may hear your little space heater in the background because it's cold. It is cold today. It's rainy. It has finally started to feel like fall, or as you just said, it feels like straight up winter right now. So
decorate away.
I'm getting close. Look, November 8th, as we record this, is probably a record for me in terms of I have not decorated yet. So, and when we were roommates last year,
you wanted to decorate for
the day after Halloween. Yes. Yeah, and I decorated for Halloween just as another holiday, and I don't think you took too kindly to that either. So, but you and Chris are in the same boat. Chris said I shouldn't have decorated for Halloween because he said I was celebrating the devil. I said I was celebrating candy. He didn't buy that. So,
are you telling me that Chris, who I adore, I love Chris did not want a reason to celebrate candy?
He's trying to tell me that's not what Halloween was about. He was trying to tell me that I was celebrating the devil and the devil's children. I don't know. He was saying it as he's eating candy, so it was, it is what it is. But Ric Flair, woo! I saw the documentary. I thought it was great. I was a little surprised that it was an hour and a half because once again, as you and I have talked about, Ric Flair's life needs more than an hour and a half, but I felt like this 30 for 30 had more of a specific angle of kind of, how he became the Nature Boy and really what the price of being the Nature Boy was. Multiple marriages, his kids are, he was never home. He drank a lot and just abused his body in that regard. So I felt like Rory Karp, who did the documentary, is one of my favorite directors or producers, whatever his exact title is. He's done a lot of the 30 for 30s for ESPN. I felt like he did a great job. He included a lot of great people that really could touch on who Ric Flair was and not necessarily who Richard Flair was, because they're two different people, as the documentary talks about. And there was actually a lot of people who didn't even make the final cut that were interviewed. But The Undertaker's in there, which I, of course, was very happy about, to see that he is still alive and well. Everybody's trying to tell me that he's, 900 years old and looks horrible, but he looked like he could come back tomorrow. Not that I want him to, because I've already said my goodbyes. Don't do that to me. I felt like, and I'll be curious once you watch it. Of course, I'm sure we'll talk about it then after you watch it. I felt like some of the strongest interviews were Triple H and Shawn Michaels, because who knows Ric Flair probably any better than those two. And I felt like they really kind of hit on some of his struggles. And then the ending where they, transitioned to... one of Rick's sons, Reed, passed away a couple years ago, how hard that was, but how that paved the way for Ashley, who is known as Charlotte in the WWE, to get her start. And to see Rick talk about her and how he's now able to live through her, and that's where his life's enjoyment comes from. I thought that part was beautifully done. So I saw it. You have not seen it.
So for me, because I haven't seen the documentary, this presents a really good opportunity just to talk about what Ric Flair means to me in general, because Ric Flair is my favorite. I have the good fortune of being a lifelong Southern professional wrestling fan, which for me meant a lot of WCW in my childhood. In the 90s, you were either in one of two camps. It was the WWE camp or the WCW camp. So for me, being from Alabama, I was decidedly in the Atlanta-bred WCW, NWA Mid-South, Jim Crockett promotion legacy. So I'm all about the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair versus Sting, Tully Blanchard.
Sting was included.
As he should have been, because that was his rival in the 90s.
Tully was included. There's a lot of people who were included. But again, there's so many people that weren't included as well. But I really felt like Rory did a great job with how he framed what the angle was, because that's what you had asked me. You had said, what is the angle? Because an hour and a half does not tell the story of Ric Flair. So I'm going to be interested to get your your take once you watch it.
There are a lot of good Ric Flair documentaries. One that WWE produced, one that WWE produced on the Four Horsemen in general. Both of those are must-sees. There's also an independently produced one back when he was with TNA, so that one could be told kind of outside of the WWE microscope. But to me, this is just an appreciation of Ric Flair, because it's incredible to me that that guy has had such an extended period of success. This is a guy that could have died in 1979. Was it the plane crash?
Yes. It's a guy
was it touched on?
Yes, it was. It's a guy who probably should have died a couple months ago. And they didn't touch on that in the documentary. Kind of as an aside, during one of the... the way the 30 for 30 frames their things is every so often they will cut to coming back from commercial. They have the director kind of point out what they were thinking, what they were going for, type thing. And they did address that while they were in post production. That's when Rick got sick. But they did touch on the plane crash as a part of the story.
What makes Rick so awesome? This should be his enduring legacy. He's obviously a great worker. He's one of the best in-ring storytellers ever, in my opinion, ever. To me, it's Ric Flair 1A, Shawn Michaels 1B. But he's also a great, mic guy. But what, to me, made Ric Flair so awesome is that you stick him in the 1980s, and in an era where WWE is arguably struggling to make stars, not just mid-level stars, but guys that kind of... are bigger than the industry. There's only a handful of those guys. We're talking Stone Cold, Austin, Hogan, Rock. There's only been a handful of guys who are bigger than the industry. And WWE hasn't really created one in a long time. But Ric Flair, over the course of 3 decades, could single-handedly make a star just by association.
Mm-hmm. And that is touched on in the documentary.
The Four Horsemen was great because you stuck those guys with him and they're automatically stars just because he's Ric Flair's hand-picked guys. Yeah. Now, there is varying level of success for each of those guys, and there were different versions of the Four Horsemen. But in the 80s, all those guys were stars. Arn Anderson, Double A, was a star. Tully was a star. Then you get to the 90s, you had the second real iteration of the Four Horsemen. He made Sting as a rival.
Mm-hmm.
But guys like Benoit...
That is touched on greatly in there.
You had guys like Benoit and Malenko who were made stars. They were great workers. Flair gave them personality.
Well, of course, Benoit is never going to be mentioned again in the same breath as professional wrestling, unfortunately.
He made Steve Mongo McMichael, who's a big enough personality anyway, but he made him a wrestling star just by association. Then you've got Evolution. He made Randy Orton and Batista stars by association, just by, at that point, his mic work. To me, Ric Flair is the greatest storyteller. He is the great in-ring wrestler. He is the greatest personality star builder in pro wrestling history. And I think that documentary, 30 for 30, is a good way to tell non-fans, because there are people who watch 30 for 30 no matter what it's on.
Yeah. I'm one of those. I mean, I don't watch every single one, but there's been times where I'm like, well, I heard of that, or that's about a subject, maybe like a football or something. I'm like, I'm going to watch that.
There's a great chance to tell non-fans how awesome Ric Flair is.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that is because there is a portion of the documentary where they show an appearance Ric Flair did on the Sally Jesse Raphael show.
That's a show that I have not thought of in 15 years.
And they showed it because, that was back in the 80s, right?
80s and early 90s.
Yeah, and they show him making this appearance, and, they really weren't taking it seriously. Everybody wanted to pretty much crush the business because it was fake, and it was, doing what some fans do, which is, it's not real, and they don't take it seriously. And so it actually, the documentary even touches on that. It touches on, asking Rick, what he felt about that. And, ESPN, I saw on social media, was kind of taking a lot of flack because people were like, well, why are you focusing on wrestling? And, I saw some people were like, if you're asking that, you don't understand. You don't understand why this is being highlighted. And like I said, I really, I saw some people who said, well, it wasn't, the interviews were stupid and it didn't do justice. There was only good parts of it, but I enjoyed it. I felt like for what they were going for, which was, in my mind, what it took to be the Nature Boy and the price of being the Nature Boy, I thought it was very well done.
Got a phone ringing in the background there. Sometimes I forget I have it. No, I think we kind of touched on everything there, just because there are a few people, the word I was looking for earlier were transcendent stars.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk wrestling as much as we talk racing, and we've talked about, the many iterations the company has gone through over the years, and the Attitude Era, which you don't like, which I liked, and we talk about guys like a Shawn Michaels and an Undertaker, even a Kane, the first iterations of Kane before he was made a laughing stock and just a joke of a character, in my opinion. Not anything against, Glenn Jacobs, who plays Kane. I'm just talking about what they did to the character. So yeah, we can sit here and just talk about all of that. But
I will say for racing fans who are still listening that are not wrestling fans, there is a racing connection. There are several. Ric Flair co-owned a team for a couple of years.
John Hunter Nemechek in the Truck Series is a big Ric Flair fan and has helmets that are painted of Ric Flair.
When WCW was on, it was a Turner-owned entity, obviously. At the time, NASCAR was on TBS.
Yep.
And there was a lot of cross-promotion. You would have wrestlers on all the time, and Flair would feud with different drivers who would come on just to talk smack.
The Rock in the early 2000s, I mean, he came to races. I've seen pictures where
he nearly owned a team.
He and
Rock
Ronnie
Racing.
Sadler. Yeah. Which again, you talk about all these plans I have for this podcast. That is another podcast that I hope to have during the off season, is to just sit down and talk racing and wrestling with Hermie Sadler. Of course, he's got a tremendous background in both those areas.
Did you know, and you'll love this, my college thesis was on the long-standing relationships and the synergy between professional wrestling and motor racing. There's this 6-page
you made
analysis.
6 pages out of that. That's impressive.
Yeah, and there's a lot more than I think anyone gives credit for.
Stone Cold was at a race, I believe last year, was it? Late last year, he's at Texas.
Goldberg was at Bristol.
Yeah, quite a few times actually. He's become like the thing at Bristol now. I don't know. I mean, from a selfish standpoint, I would love to see how we could, get more wrestling personalities to races. Because there's guys who are racing fans that are in wrestling.
Their business is turning ordinary people into stars, and I think I know this is a line that NASCAR doesn't want to cross.
I'm not talking. Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about
fixing races,
right? We're not talking about the people who say that.
But as far as the way that you market personalities and the way that you turn them up,
I think even the demographics, a little bit maybe there might be a crossover.
That's part of my thesis.
Yeah, so I would love to see it, but I can't wait to see what you think of the documentary. So I think we're at almost 2 hours here.
So for the 2 people still listening, thank you. You are our biggest fans, and we couldn't do 2-hour podcasts about wrestling and racing without you. So if you're still listening at this point, how about this? If you're still listening at this point, send me a Twitter message, and I'm going to send you a bunch of Auto Week gear and magazines. Seriously, if you're still listening and you can hear the sound of my voice, I will send you some Auto Week gear.
Well, we're not live, but when this goes up, probably tomorrow, Thursday, then yes, you can promote the podcast and then tell people when they get to a certain point where you speak directly to them.
I'm not going to tell them that. I want the first person, to make this fair, the first one person. No, 2. I'll do 2. The first 2 people that send me a Twitter message or a Facebook message saying you heard what I said in the second hour of this program, I'm going to send you some Auto Week swag, so, message me.
I feel bad. I don't have any swag to give away. I just, I have a podcast to offer. So, and if you liked the wrestling and racing dialogue, again, all hopes are that I will do that again with Hermie Sadler sometime in the near future. But next week is Tony Gibson. Next week is Homestead. We're done. We're done with the season, and we're done with this podcast. Again, do you feel good? Are we Have we touched on everything?
Oh, there's not enough hours in the world. But
There's not.
I feel like the people got their money.
There's
and
not.
they spent $0 on it, so that's about the value.
I mean, if people want to send me dollars, I'm fine with that. But I feel like with the agenda that we came in on, the notes that we did not write down for this, we are just shooting the breeze. Are we good?
We are good.
All right. So, well, I mean, thanks. I don't know. We're friends. I feel like I don't need to make this a whole formal thing. We're done. So.
No, we need to do this again. Though. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there'll be plenty of times where somebody will be like, "No, I don't want to be on your podcast," and I'll be like, "Hey, Matt, I need a guest."
I've always been good being someone's backup option.
The second choice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Matt.